Okay, you just have to say it again. You got to say it exactly the same way again.
To the discussion that we had the other day, I wanted to make it clear that I'm listening to you. Okay. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I appreciate that you are taking this emergency measure to convene this group. In my judgment as the governor, I think it's absolutely necessary that you take this step at this time. In fact, I don't think we have any other choice. So I commend you for your leadership, for invoking the statute that enables this group to meet, and I thank you for your willingness to do it. Rhode Island at this point remains in better shape than many other states. We haven't seen the spike in cases as many other states have. That's a good thing. It's my goal to keep it that way. But the way we're doing that is by imposing very radical restrictions on our economy. And the result of those radical restrictions is that our revenues have really taken a plunge. The casino is one of our biggest sources of revenue. Unfortunately, I had to close that weeks ago. Restaurants are all closed, so we're all feeling that. I don't expect this to be permanent. It's my top goal to reopen the economy, but at the moment, we are facing a liquidity situation, a problem. We don't have the liquidity we need. All of that has been exacerbated by the fact that the federal government pushed back the tax filing date from April 15th to July 15th. Once that happened, it absolutely necessitated a measure of this kind. I have, in the past few weeks, been in touch with many, many CEOs from the very biggest companies in America to some of the smallest companies right here in Rhode Island. Every one of them is doing what you're about to do, which is to say calling their banker and lining up liquidity. So for the people of Rhode Island, this is not a reason to panic. This is their legislators taking action. You're taking action in light of the emergency to secure the fiscal stability of the state and, frankly, to make sure that we can continue to run the government. We have hundreds of employees who are providing life-saving, the state police and the Department of Health, DCYF. We have to keep the lights on so we can keep Rhode Islanders alive. So it's not lost on me that I'm asking you to do something extreme. It's necessary. This is a crisis like no other. As to the issue of using this body instead of the full assembly, the nature of this public health crisis is such that if you were to convene your members at this time, it would pose a grave health risk to every one of them, and I don't think that's in anyone's interest. So I also would like to make sure you keep this meeting short because I want you guys to get home and be safe, and your staff, so I'm going to close it out there. A final thank you to the treasurer, who's done an extraordinary job working quickly and smartly and efficiently with my staff and your staff. He's done a good job. He's lined up some excellent options for the state. He'll review those for you, and I think you'll be satisfied with those options. Additionally, in the new stimulus package, as I've been told, the federal government, through the Fed or the Treasury, may be allowing states and hospitals to get liquidity from them. That's not going to be available for a month or two. We will evaluate that when it becomes available, and at that time, if there are better terms, obviously we'll change course. So, any questions for me? No.
Your judgment has been very good. And I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I wanted to say, Governor, thank you for taking the steps you've taken to protect our citizens in these extraordinary times. I recognize that your decisions
have to be very tough, and your judgment has been good. You've protected our citizens, but it's got to be difficult to shut down the entire economy. So I just want to thank you on behalf of Rhode Islanders for taking a balanced approach, which balances our healthcare needs versus our economic needs, and you've done that in a very commendable way. Your judgment's been very good on behalf of Rhode Islanders, so I just want to thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you, I appreciate that.
I also want to join the speaker in commending you, Governor, for the great job you've done. You were on top of this issue from the outset. It made a tremendous difference. We are not experiencing some of the spikes that other states have been experiencing. So on behalf of my colleagues in the Senate, and on behalf of my constituents, and on behalf of all Rhode Islanders, I want to thank you for the great job you've done. I certainly want to commend the Director of the Department of Health for the great job that she has done. And I think you've lent a lot of comfort to a lot of Rhode Islanders during these difficult times. So thank you very much. Please continue to do what you're doing and stay safe.
Thank you, and to you. Stay safe. I think we're doing the best we can, right? We're doing the best we can under difficult circumstances, making decisions quickly. And I would just reiterate again to you all and to your staff, thank you for moving quickly. Nobody wants to be here. Nobody wants to be having to do this, but it's a necessary step. And at the end of the day, I'm confident that a few months from now, you'll be happy you did this, and I'm confident we'll be back on our feet. So with that, I'm going to let you get to work and turn it over to Jonathan Womer.
Thank you, Governor. Speaker, President, Chairman, if it's okay, I'm going to run through this handout I have before you, discussing a little bit of the cash flow projections as they look currently, a little bit on expenditures and revenues, and a little bit of a discussion of the federal bills and what we know at this moment. After that, the Treasurer, I think, can provide more detail on the request we have for a $300 million line of credit and some of the details of those parameters. Is that all right? All right, thank you. So, as you see from this handout, we're looking at a low spot on available liquidity in late May. And that's primarily because the federal government moved the filing date for income taxes from April 15th to July 15th. And the state of Rhode Island is bound to that, that decision by the federal government. And that moves $300 million in cash that we would normally have early, further out into July. Now, just from an accounting standpoint, that does get moved back in our ability to spend, but from a cash flow standpoint, we have expenses now that are coming in that depend or would normally depend on that revenue. So that's the primary driver of this request and why it is extraordinarily necessary at this time. Now, this isn't a discussion of new spending. We certainly are going to have those discussions as we look at the current year budget and the next year budget. This is a discussion on liquidity and timing of revenue. There are obviously aspects of revenue that are slowing down just because of the economic impact in sales and in lottery revenue, as the governor discussed. As we see the federal stimulus package and it comes to fruition and what that means for us, and as we all sit down and look at revenues and how they might have fallen short, and that package, we're going to have to certainly reconcile the budget. But this is really about the liquidity issue and the timing of revenues for the short run. The most recent stimulus package does certainly have a lot for Rhode Island. However, it does really appear that it might take a couple of months before we understand fully what we can spend these funds on, and full guidance from the federal government comes out from those federal agencies. In addition, there'll be some lag in timing just simply on drawing those funds down. And as a result, we feel it is necessary for this $300 million line of credit currently. Do you have any questions for me before we turn it over to the treasurer?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Speaker, Mr. President, Chairman, for convening this meeting to keep our state government funded and operational at a time when our citizens need it most. The resolution in front of you will ensure that in this time of crisis, the state can continue to serve the public. Vital services will continue to be available to those who have gotten sick or been laid off, and we will be able to continue paying our healthcare workers and our first responders so they can focus on doing their jobs and not have to worry about whether their paychecks will keep coming. This situation requires immediate action. We typically try to keep the balance in the state's general fund at least $40 million. The general fund is the fund that serves most state agencies. As a result of the sudden loss of revenue, deferred revenue, and increased expenditures, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis, we are anticipating falling below that $40 million level as early as Monday, and the balance could fall to zero soon after that. My team and I have been working with the governor and her team, with your fiscal staffs around the clock for the last 2 weeks to solve this problem. We have taken every measure that is already available to us, and so we are now requesting the authority to take out a line of credit to help the general fund meet its cash flow needs, at least until income tax revenues arrive in January. I would note that although the circumstances that bring us here are extraordinary, the tool that we are asking for is quite common. Businesses often take out lines of credit during temporary declines of revenue to meet their cash flow challenges. And although the state of Rhode Island has not needed to borrow money for cash flow purposes for several years, we used to do so quite commonly, most recently during the Great Recession. We've been in negotiation with several lenders prepared to offer the state a line of credit, and we expect to be able to close on such a loan in a matter of days. As negotiations are still ongoing, I cannot discuss specifics, but I will tell you generally the types of terms that we believe we can secure. As is common with lines of credit, the interest rates would be variable. The rates that we have been offered are generally less than 1 month LIBOR plus 2%, which at today's interest rates mean about 3% annualized. The lines of credit that we are being offered generally run 4 to 12 months. One of the benefits of a line of credit structure as opposed to a traditional tax anticipation note is that we will have the option of only drawing as much as we need when we need it. We are asking for authorization to borrow up to $300 million, but if we do not end up needing that much, we will borrow less. And given the uncertainty we face in the coming months, having that flexibility is very attractive. One question that has been raised is the constitutionality of such a loan, and I would like to take a moment to explain why we, with the advice of bond counsel, are confident that a loan of this type is allowable. While the state constitution does prohibit general obligation borrowing for tax anticipation purposes across fiscal years, that is not the type of loan that this is. This is a line of credit, not a tax anticipation note, and it does not carry a general obligation pledge, but rather an appropriation pledge. An appropriation pledge is considered a lesser pledge than a general obligation. It would not carry the full faith and credit of the state. But the lenders that we are talking to have indicated that they would be willing to accept an appropriation pledge given the unusual circumstance and the state's strong track record of repaying its creditors. So with this temporary and vital tool, we will be able to ensure that our public health agencies, our first responders, our National Guard and state police, and all state agencies will be able to continue serving the public unhindered in the weeks and months to come. So thank you very much again, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
I did have one question, General Treasurer. It has been asked of me by a few constituents, why do we need the 40 million fund balance that we talked about, that particular number? I know you guys have worked hard on that, but just so that the public can understand what that really, where it came from.
Yes, thank you. So even during normal circumstances, it's not uncommon that there be a surprise in our cash flow of $10 million or more in either direction, positive surprises or negative surprises. We usually have pretty good visibility into our expenditures. We know what's going out the door, but we can't always predict what's coming in terms of income tax withholdings, sales tax revenue, lottery transfers. And so all of these forecasts are based on estimates, and it's not uncommon, even in normal times, for those estimates to be off by several $1 million day to day, which is why we try to maintain that $40 million cushion so that we don't inadvertently run out of cash in the general fund. I would say that that need to maintain a balance of at least $40 million is even more important now that things are so uncertain and so volatile. So that's something that we try to do in normal times, and I think it's more important now even than ever.
Thank you. Thank you both for your presentation, and I'll address my question to either one of you. For the benefit of the public, I think some people are going to ask themselves why we're not relying on the rainy day fund to, in fact, cover some of this fluctuation in revenue and expenses. And I know the answer, it's something that we normally use to buffer those things. But could you please explain how that works so that the public understands?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question, Speaker. It's important for the public to understand that the rainy day fund is not a separate account with money in it. There are some places that manage their rainy day fund in that fashion. That's not the way that the state of Rhode Island does it under our state constitution. Under our state constitution, what we colloquially call the rainy day fund is actually a cash buffer in the general fund that requires that the state begin and end each fiscal year with a certain amount of funding in the general fund. It's equivalent to 5% of the previous year's revenue. So that's roughly $200 million of state-sourced revenue. So we begin each year with about $200 million in the general fund. We end each year with about $200 million in the general fund. But during the course of the year, the fund balance can vary. There are times of the year when tax revenues have just come in and we're quite a bit higher than $200 million. There are also times of year when we're lower. And unfortunately, the time of year when we are typically the tightest in the general fund from a fund balance point of view is usually March and early April, right before income tax revenues come in. So in addition to all of the health challenges that we are struggling with as a state, fiscally, this crisis really could not have come at a worse time. So the answer to your question simply is that under the state constitution, which dictates this, the general fund, the rainy day fund is not a separate account. It is a cash buffer in the general fund that we begin and end each fiscal year with.
Mr. President?
No, please, Senator Palmer.
Thank you. So probably just a few comments on some of the content of the resolution that I think both of you have alluded to, and if you think that anything I mentioned needs further clarification, I would appreciate that. I also want to thank both of you and your staffs for the communication that's taken place over the last 2.5 weeks. I remember the first call from the General Treasurer on a Sunday evening when he alerted us to the need to start to address this. And the level of communication between the Governor's office, the Treasurer's office, the House fiscal staff and its leadership, and the Senate fiscal staff has been extraordinary, consistent with the extraordinary challenge and times that we're facing. I think, as the governor mentioned, we'd all like to be with all our colleagues to look at this. And so there might be some natural concern that the details of this perhaps have not been as vetted as it would be in that context. But I want to assure our colleagues and the public that because of the comprehensive nature of the information you've shared with us, because of the level of communication that you've engaged in with us. And by us, I'm talking about really the entire team here, the governor's office, the treasurer's office, the House and the Senate. I feel confident that this has been vetted as much as any financial document or study that I've been involved with during my service in the Senate. It's why is $300 million? The analysis and numbers behind the summary that the governor's office has provided to us has been thorough, certainly substantiated for me that we're at the right number and why. The fact that the resolution itself limits it to cash flows, so there's guardrails around that. The reporting requirements built into this so that even in the short term, we're constantly informed as to what proceeds are being used in the line of credit and what they're being used for. The refined mechanism that the governor talked about, if in fact the federal government, even though it's short term, if in fact the federal government offers programs that allows us to save money. So all of that is a consequence of the comprehensive analysis and information that has been shared among all the partners in this room. And for that and for other reasons, as I think as the Speaker said, extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. We realize this is an extraordinary measure, but I want to thank you for the extraordinary efforts that you have made over the past 2.5 weeks, virtually around the clock, to keep us informed and allow us to be a part of your team in getting this resolution done. So thank you for that.
I too want to extend my thanks to both of you. The treasurer, I know you've worked very closely with my colleagues, my legal counsel, my staff, and my Senate Finance Committee members. They had a lot of questions. I want to thank you for answering those questions and for putting them at ease during these difficult times. And Jonathan, I want to thank you also for working with my colleagues on the Senate Finance Committee and especially with the chairman. I think this, what we're looking at, the resolution that we're looking at, although this is an imperfect way to do it, I think it's going to go a long way in easing the burdens on a lot of Rhode Islanders. So I want to thank you both for your commitment and for your hard work and those of your staff. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, too. I always like to say, as I said to the governor well before she was elected, that you cannot lead from behind. I learned that a long time ago in officer candidate school, that if you're going to be a leader, you got to be out front. And I wouldn't be sitting here agreeing to this if I thought that all of the details that the speakers before me have said. This is an extraordinary time. It's not normal. We can't wait until we think it is going to be normal to act. So that's what I mean, you can't lead from behind. There will be people who will criticize what we do and say, I get that. But the issue is that the government has to have a continuity of operations. If anything happens bad with the government, it's very difficult to rebound from that. So from my perspective, I looked at it, am I doing something that's going to help continue the government that we have? And I think so. The other thing that I always do is make sure that what we do can be measured and it can be managed. And I'm glad to see that in the proposal that we have, or even if we didn't have this proposal, I would certainly use all of the legal powers I had to make sure there was great oversight in how this money is being used, because I think the public has yet to really understand is that we're not rewriting the budget. And I have to say that again, we are not rewriting the budget. There's still a lot of work to be done on producing a document that we're required to do. This is really a cash flow issue, a cash flow issue, so that my constituents don't think that we're adding or subtracting or doing something with the budget. So I really appreciate all the information that you've given me, because I represent them, and if I thought it was a bad deal, I wouldn't sign it. It's clear. But I think you've done a great job in making sure that we can continue as we're doing, and that, and I will be watching. I will be watching every day, every second, to make sure that at the times we use this, that we pay it back, so that 6 to 7 to 8, 9 years from now, we're not still doing the same thing. So I really appreciate your help in that. And Jonathan, I work with you every day, and we will be asking for reports and for information. I'm sure that you will agree that you will provide for us in a timely way so that we can continue what we're doing.
Looking forward to it, Chairman.
I'm sure you are.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you all. I want to thank and recognize my friend, Dominic Ruggiero, the Senate President, for his tremendous leadership in these difficult times, Chairman Abney, Chairman Conley, all of my House colleagues that I've been in pretty much constant contact with. I thank them for their advice, their questions, and their interest in the state of Rhode Island. Sharon Reynolds, who's always phenomenal, and my right arm, the state of Rhode Island, and all of us owe her a tremendous gratitude. Thank you, Sharon. Danica Iacocca, my legal counsel, she's been great. I know you're watching. Thank you, Danica. Lynn Urbani, she's my policy director and liaison to finance. She's been great. Lita Shikachi, Joe Shikachi, who's here, has been someone that I've been able to rely upon for advice and good judgment in these difficult times. Thank you, Lita. And the governor and her staff and the general treasurer. As we've said, these are extraordinary times. And what I've seen in these extraordinary times is a lot of good people really coming together and working collaboratively to row in the same direction. I'm just going to make a few more comments beyond thanking everybody for their hard work, and please correct me if I'm wrong in anything that I say or suggest. Chairman Abney, I think, said it best. So the public can be very secure in the notion that we are not creating any new spending. This is just some short-term borrowing for cash flow purposes. No new programming, no new authority to spend any additional monies. We're working off last year's budget. We're just dealing with the fact that our revenues are significantly constrained because of the pandemic, and our expenses are actually increasing at the same time. So you've got the clash of the worst possible set of circumstances. Normally, how I think we would address this is a tax anticipation note, but that has to be paid off within the same fiscal year, if I'm correct. So with the federal filing being moved to July 15, our normal tools don't work under these set of circumstances. So now we need a vehicle that takes us beyond July 1st, and it's the function of this board working collaboratively with the governor and her administration, the treasurer, and his team to make sure that we can get beyond July 1st. That's my understanding. I believe that's correct? Thank you. In light of the fact that we're in extraordinary times and we have very unusual circumstances, I've never seen the government shut down like it is. If you told me 2 months ago this was going to happen, I just would not believe it. This is one of the most unusual circumstances and emergencies that I've seen faced in my lifetime. So in light of that, I am very comfortable moving forward with an extraordinary resolution to that extraordinary problem. So as some of this board's members have said, It's not perfect. It never will be, because we're dealing with an extraordinary problem that is highly unusual and will probably never be repeated. And that's the purpose for boards such as these. And in light of that, I'm very comfortable moving forward as we're going to move forward. But once again, the work of this board doesn't get done without a lot of collaboration. The administration's been great, the Treasurer's office has been great, the Senate's been great, all of my House colleagues have been great. So I just want to thank everybody in these unusual and extraordinary times for coming together the way we all have to best serve the citizens of the state of Rhode Island. So thank you very much. With that, are there any other questions or comments?
I'm all set, thank you, President.
All right. With that, I am handing the resolution of the Rhode Island Disaster Emergency Funding Board authorizing borrowing in an amount not to exceed $300 million to the Senate President for his signature.
Mr. Speaker, do we need a vote on this of the board?
I'm sorry, we actually should.
I will move the resolution, Mr. Speaker.
I will second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let the record reflect that there were 4 ayes and no opposition to the passage of this resolution.
Mr. Speaker, would you like? Okay. Senator Connell, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We should have a copy of that made?
Yeah, we'll
A
take care
couple
of the
copies?
copies.
Okay.
Why don't you just move them?
I make a motion that this board adjourn.
Second that?
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The board stands adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you all. Great job.